The chandelier glowed like a crown above the ballroom, casting soft, golden light over the sea of polished faces and polished intentions. At the head table stood my sister Julia, radiant in her couture wedding gown, the crystals in her veil catching every glimmer like paparazzi flashbulbs. She held her champagne flute high, commanding the attention of 200 of the city's elite. They leaned in, breath held. It was time for her speech, and I was the subject. Her maid of honor, her older sister, Emma, the family embarrassment. I smoothed the fabric of my off-the-rack black dress, trying not to notice the stares, some sympathetic, others smug. Aunt Margaret whispered behind her program. Cousin David's wife kept darting glances between me and Julia like it was a reality show she couldn't stop watching. They all knew what was coming. Julia had rehearsed this performance for weeks, a speech crafted with just enough sugar to mask the sting, a tribute to her big sister who just couldn't quite make life work. If only they knew the truth. I glanced at my phone under the tablecloth. 8:47 p.m. The press embargo would lift at exactly 9 o'clock. 13 minutes. 13 more minutes of playing the fool. Before I speak about my amazing new husband, Marcus, Julia began, her voice butter-smooth and amplified across the ballroom. I want to talk about family, and the lessons we learn from those closest to us. Here it comes. Beside her sat Marcus Petton AUI, tailored to perfection, a walking resume of generational wealth, the kind of man my parents had always imagined for their daughters. Julia, of course, had delivered. I, on the other hand, had delivered disappointment. My sister Emma is here tonight, Julia said, turning to me with the polished warmth of a politician, and I've learned so much from her journey. The spotlight, both literal and figurative, swung to me. I smiled, every inch the humble sister, the trier, the dreamer, the almost successful. Emma's story is one of exploration, Julia continued, of trying every road, every idea, no matter how unconventional. There were polite chuckles. Someone actually sighed. She's worked a dozen jobs, lived in tiny shoebox apartments, chased startup after startup. Uncle Charles shook his head, pity practically dripping from his brows. She currently consults freelance, Julia added, the phrase heavy with unspoken italics, living in her charming little studio downtown, holding on to dreams I hope she never stops believing in. Translation, still broke, still chasing fantasies. What they didn't know, that little studio was actually a full-floor penthouse I owned outright, in a building I'd bought through a shell corporation. My so-called old Honda was cover, while my true car sat in a private garage next to a Bentley and a Lucid Air. And those failed ventures? They'd been calculated moves in a long game no one saw coming. But the greatest thing I've learned from Emma, Julia said with feigned sincerity, is what not to do. A low murmur rolled through the crowd, somewhere between surprise and admiration. She taught me the value of realism, the importance of stability, of practical goals and grounded ambition. Julia turned to me again, eyes glinting. Emma, I hope tonight, seeing what true success and love built on shared values looks like, inspires you to finally put those wild dreams to rest. She raised her glass. To Emma, may marriage teach her the success she couldn't find on her own. The crowd lifted their flutes. I lifted mine too, calm, composed. And then, it happened. The ballroom screens flickered, the wedding slideshow blinked away, a breaking news alert overtook the room. Breaking news, the anchor's voice boomed, a local woman has just become the youngest billionaire in state history. All heads swiveled toward the screens, Julia's hand froze mid-toast. Emma Rodriguez, age 32. Has been revealed as the secret founder and CEO of Quantum Dynamics, recently acquired by Meridian Corp. For $4.7 billion. My photo appeared on screen, not a social media snap, but the professional headshot Forbes had commissioned for tomorrow's exclusive. She built the company in stealth mode over 5 years, creating revolutionary machine learning algorithms now used by major global financial institutions. I didn't move. The ballroom didn't breathe. Marcus looked like the rug had been yanked from under him. My parents sat frozen, processing the collapse of their lifelong assumptions. The screen kept rolling. Emma Rodriguez is expected to personally net $3.2 billion from the deal, making her the youngest self-made female billionaire in state history. The anchor added one more detail that landed like a sledgehammer. Among the clients who rely on quantum dynamics technology, Petton and Associates. Marcus firm. His jaw dropped. Suddenly, the crowd was no longer looking at Julia. All eyes were on me, the disappointment, the underachiever, the woman who had just outplayed them all. I sipped my champagne, finally tasting it for what it was. Victory. The news report faded, replaced once again by the wedding slideshow, but no one was watching Julia and Marcus's perfectly curated love story anymore. Every eye in the ballroom was on me. I rose slowly, smoothing my simple black dress, the one that now looked elegant rather than economical under the ballroom lights. "Well," I said, my voice calm but clear, slicing through the silence, "I guess the cat's out of the bag." Julia blinked rapidly, her composure slipping for the first time all night. "Emma, how long have you?" 5 years, I replied evenly. "Ever since you told me at Christmas that I needed to stop embarrassing the family and get serious, that my little computer hobby was going nowhere." I turned to face the room, the same people who'd spent the night whispering behind linen napkins and offering tight, pitying smiles. "I want to thank my sister for her touching words. She's right, I've learned a lot from family. I've learned the power of silence when you're building something real. I've learned how easily people mistake polish for progress. And I've learned that sometimes, the most elegant revenge is success." Marcus stood, stiff and unsteady. "Emma, if I said anything..." "You didn't say anything tonight, Marcus," I said, cutting him off gently. "But last month, when you told your golf buddies Julia was lucky to have one successful sister to offset the family failure, that was insightful." His expression faltered, realizing, too late, I'd been seated at the next table that day, quiet, listening, negotiating a Series C investment over lunch. I glanced at my phone, dozens of messages. 47 interview requests, 12 investor pitches, an invitation to speak at the World Economic Forum. Not bad for a Friday evening. Julia had collapsed back into her chair, her speech in shambles, her moment undone. "The deal closes Monday morning," I said, holding their gaze. "Meridian wants quantum dynamics to remain autonomous. I'll stay on as CEO. My next venture will be announced soon." I looked at Julia again. The shimmer of her wedding makeup couldn't mask the storm behind her eyes. "You said earlier that witnessing real success might inspire me." It did. But not in the way you think. Watching this family obsess over appearances, over curated stability, pushed me to build something that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. My phone buzzed again. A text from my assistant. "Forbes cover confirmed. Interview moved to tomorrow. Congrats, boss." I picked up my purse, light and small, the only thing about me that still passed as unassuming. "I should get going," I said, slipping the phone inside. "I have an early meeting with Forbes, something about a cover story." I walked to Julia, leaned down, and kissed her cheek lightly. "Congratulations on your wedding, sis," I whispered. "Marcus just married into a billionaire family, though technically, that's thanks to me, not you." As I made my way to the exit, silence followed me like a shadow. 200 people who had spent the night looking down at me were now watching the youngest billionaire in state history walk out the door. At the threshold, I paused. The wedding photographer was fumbling with his camera, probably realizing he'd just captured one of the most expensive humiliations in recent social memory. "Oh, and Julia?" I called back. "That cozy little studio you mentioned? I own the building, all 47 floors. Consider it my wedding gift, a reminder to aim for realistic goals, instead of impossible dreams." The next morning, I was in my office, the real one, 45 stories up in Meridian Tower, sipping the same coffee I'd always loved, long before anyone knew I could afford better. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Family, friends, strangers, opportunists. But one message stood out. "Dr. Sarah Kim, saw the news. Remember when you asked if anyone would ever take your impossible ideas seriously? You have your answer. Proud of you, Dr. Kim." I smiled. My assistant knocked softly. "Ms. Rodriguez, Julia Petton is here. She says she's your sister." Of course she was. "Send her in." Julia walked in looking like she hadn't missed a beat, polished, composed, curated. Emma, she began, her smile gentle but rehearsed. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just reviewing acquisition proposals, I said, gesturing to the chair across from mine, the very desk where I'd quietly built a billion-dollar empire while the world dismissed me. She sat carefully, clutching her purse like it might shield her from the truth. I wanted to apologize for last night. The speech, it wasn't meant to hurt you. Motivational, was it? I thought, if I showed you what stability looked like, it might encourage you to try a more traditional path. Even now, even here, she still believed she'd been the one leading. Julia, I said gently, how much do you think Marcus made last year? She straightened proudly. Almost $500,000. He's one of Pettin's top performers. I tapped my keyboard. Pettin Associates paid Quantum Dynamics $847 million in licensing fees over the past 3 years. Your husband's entire firm runs on my algorithms. Her smile flickered. Your wedding last night, Marcus said it cost around $300,000. Said it was his gift to you. He didn't mention the venue, catering, and florist were all subsidiaries of my holding companies. This time, the smile collapsed. You used my money, I said, to teach me a lesson about success. She was quiet, then, quietly broken. I didn't know, how could I? You didn't ask. You saw an old car, a small apartment, and a quiet sister, and assumed you had the full story. I walked to the window, taking in the skyline. But that's not what upset me. What hurt was watching you use the most important day of your life to try and humiliate someone you claim to love. A beat of silence. I was jealous, she whispered. I turned. Of what? Your freedom. Your risk. I did everything by the book. Good grades, the right schools, the perfect job, the picture-perfect marriage. I followed every rule we were taught. You ignored the whole plan and still built something remarkable. And just like that, the sister I hadn't seen in years, the real Julia, peeked through the cracks. I was so sure I had the better life, she said softly. I thought I was winning. I looked at her. And now? She met my eyes. I think I was playing the wrong game. I saw something in Julia's eyes I hadn't seen in years. Not pride. Not pity. Something real. Vulnerability. Julia, I said softly, you weren't wrong about the value of stability, or the importance of smart planning. But you were wrong about one thing, thinking success only looks one way. My phone buzzed. A message from my aerospace lead. They wanted to finalize Monday's agenda, flight testing, satellite prototypes, strategic scaling. I glanced at Julia. I'm building something new now, I said. Quantum Aerospace. We're going to reshape how humanity builds in space, from satellite systems to orbital manufacturing platforms. Her brows lifted, cautious curiosity overtaking defensiveness. Space manufacturing? She echoed. I smiled, a real one. The first I'd given her in a long time. Want to hear about it? For the next hour, I laid it out. My vision for autonomous AI platforms operating in microgravity. Materials that couldn't be manufactured on Earth. Modular space stations producing the infrastructure for the next era of exploration. Clean energy arrays. Deep space engines. Asteroid resource labs. Julia listened, really listened. She asked questions, good ones, about scalability, about government contracts, about defense and civilian crossover. You know, she said slowly, I might still have connections. Marcus' firm worked with NASA contractors, and some defense startups, too. If you're serious. I studied her carefully. Are you offering to help? She hesitated, then nodded. If you'll let me. I know I don't deserve it. Not after last night, but I want to try. I want to be the sister who supports your wild ideas, not the one who tries to kill them. I sat back, weighing the past against the possibility of something new, not just for the company, but for us. There might be a place for you at Quantum Aerospace, I said, not because you're my sister, but because you bring real value, strategic partnerships, investor relationships, policy alignment. Her face lit up. You mean it? I do. But Julia, this isn't a family favor. If you join, you work for me, not with me, for me. My rules, my standards, my mission. She nodded quickly. hands clasped like she was sealing a deal with fate. I understand. And one more thing, next time you give a speech about success and failure. I paused. Maybe make sure you know which one you're talking about. She laughed. And this time, it wasn't defensive or rehearsed. It was real. Deal. As she walked out of my office to consider the offer, I leaned back, struck by how much could change in a single day. 24 hours ago, I was the cautionary tale. Now, I was offering the keynote at my sister's turning point. The phone rang. Forbes. Ms. Rodriguez, the journalist said. First, congratulations. The world is fascinated. A billion-dollar empire built in silence, right under your family's nose. How did you do it? I turned to the window, to the skyline I used to dream beneath, wondering if anyone would ever take me seriously. Easy, I said. I stopped building for validation and started building for impact. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about building something that still matters, even if no one ever claps. And what's next for Emma Rodriguez? I thought of orbiting factories. Satellites programmed by AI. The sister who might now help me build the future. The sky's not the limit anymore, I said. It's just the launchpad. That Monday, the Forbes cover dropped. The Billionaire Next Door, How Emma Rodriguez Quietly Built an AI Empire. It chronicled the 5-year ascent of the misunderstood older sister who'd outbuilt every expectation. But the most meaningful moment didn't come from press. It came in a quiet text. First day at Quantum Aerospace tomorrow. Thank you for the second chance. Let's build something impossible, together. Julia. Sometimes, revenge isn't about payback. Sometimes, it's offering someone the space to grow, and watching them choose to rise. And if you're very, very lucky, they do.